Good afternoon, good evening, everyone, from wherever you're joining us. My name is Joseph Mwazanje, and I'm delighted to be joining you today from sunny Nairobi, the perfect setting for today's webinar. Welcome to today's session, Data Protection Compliance in Zambia, the journey so far, understanding the evolution and the current trends, proudly hosted by Video Zambia in partnership with Video East Africa. Now, let's be honest. When we mention data protection compliance, it might sound like one of those topics you should care about, but perhaps aren't always excited to dive into. We have all been there, but today we promise to keep this session practical, insightful, and highly relevant for you and your organization. Think of data protection as a journey. Zambia has embarked on this journey, navigating important milestones, overcoming hurdles, and identifying best practices along the way. So whether you're already deeply involved in compliance or just getting started, we assure you there is something valuable here for everyone today. Before we get going, let's see who is traveling with us today. In the chat, please take a moment to introduce yourself by sharing your name, your organization, and where you're joining us from. We always love seeing how diverse and vibrant our audience is. Just a few quick housekeeping tips before we begin. This webinar is being recorded and we'll upload it afterward to Video East Africa and Video Zambia's YouTube channels, which is very, very ideal if you like to revisit important points or share the session with colleagues who couldn't attend today. Please note that we won't be sharing the slides, so I strongly encourage you to take notes, even if you're multitasking right now. Now we see you. Please direct your questions to the Q&A tab. Rather than the chat, we'll have a dedicated Q&A session towards the end, where our panelists will address all your queries. Also, finally, please feel free to use the chat box for general comments, ideas, or networking with your fellow participants throughout the webinar. So please, let's keep texting the chat box where you're joining us from, your name and the organization you are representing. Apologies, the chat box was disabled. Now it's enabled. Please confirm. Thank you, Atinashe, all the way from Video Zambia. Thank you, Babashi Bwambo from Rwanda. Thank you, Leandro from Zambia. Thank you, Ruth from Zambia. Thank you for joining us. Okay. As we keep introducing ourselves, now, to officially kick off today's discussion, it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, an accomplished leader who will open the webinar and introduce our distinguished panelists. Deborah Chandanonde is the Chief Executive Officer and the Managing Partner of BDO Zambia Limited. In addition to her role as the CEO, she serves as the tax and business outsourcing partner, demonstrating her multifaceted expertise and strong influence within the firm. Mrs. Nonde has more than 30 years of extensive professional experience in accounting, taxation, and business services. Deborah is highly respected both in Zambia and internationally. She is a fellow member of the Zambia Institute of Chartered Accountants and a fellow member of the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants, underscoring her deep expertise in financial management, regulatory compliance, as well as strategic advisory. Given her impressive qualifications and extensive experience, Deborah is the ideal person to set the stage for today's conversation on Zambia's evolving data protection landscape. Now, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in warmly welcoming our very own Debbie to officially open our webinar and introduce our esteemed panelists. And I'll see you again towards the end of the webinar during the Q&A session. Debbie, over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar on data protection. At BDO, we are proud to be at the forefront of providing not just compliance solutions, but also strategic insights to help business thrive in a data-driven world. As we may or may not know, data is the new oil, a valuable resource that powers business decisions, innovation, and growth. However, just like oil, if mishandled, data can become a liability rather than an asset. In Zambia, the Data Protection Act 2021 provides the legal framework that organizations must follow to ensure that personal data is collected, processed, and protected responsibly. Today, my colleagues and I from BDO Zambia and BDO East Africa will explore the evolution of data protection, the current trends in data security, and provide you with practical insights on how to stay compliant with the Act while safeguarding your business' most valuable asset, and that's data. Let me introduce our speakers for today. So firstly, we've got Godsev Nekede, who is a partner in advisory and audit in BDO Zambia. Godsev is a fellow of ACCA and Zika with over 25 years of experience in audit and financial management across Zambia and Zimbabwe. We also have Zai Sheikh, partner in risk advisory, international audit, and forensic at BDO East Africa. Zai is a partner for risk advisory, internal audit, and forensic services, and head of advisory at BDO East Africa, which covers Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, and Ethiopia, with over 30 years of experience. We then also have Paul. Paul is the manager for technology advisory and business intelligence services at BDO East Africa. Paul it covers Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, and Ethiopia as well, with over 11 years of experience. He's got experience in IT consulting, and he specializes in information system governance and data security. Lastly, we've got Michael. Michael Mutumo is Information Security Manager at BDO Zambia. Michael is an experienced information security manager with over 10 years of expertise in IT governance, cybersecurity, data protection, and regulatory compliance. At BDO, he leads the firm security program, ensuring alignment with global standards and reducing risk through AI-driven threat analysis. This is the team that's going to take us through our webinar today. At this point, I'd like to now ask Godsev Nekede to take us through the first part. Over to you, Godsev.
Thank you, Debbie. Allow me to begin by introducing BDO Zambia. BDO Zambia is a proud member of the BDO Global Network, which spans in over 160 countries and territories and brings together deep knowledge about the local and international experience required to operate in these markets. As part of this global family, Video Zambia benefits from shared standards, global practices, and commitment to exceptional client service. As BDO, we pride ourselves as a firm who's interested in providing exceptional client service to our clients in various countries and territories. We also maintain a very strong working relationship with BDO East Africa, covering Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Ethiopia, and DRC. We are possibly one of the firms with an office in DRC in terms of the top 5 firms. Our BDO East Africa has got a strong DRC firm there, which can provide various support to various clients in that market. This collaboration is anchored in a shared vision to support clients navigating regional and cross-border challenges, including areas such as digital transformation, governance, and regulatory compliance, such as data protection. Today's engagement is just one example on how we work together across borders to share insights, foster dialogue, and promote best practices. Before we proceed, I would like to take a moment to offer a brief apology on behalf of the Data Protection Commissioner of Zambia, who unfortunately is unable to attend today due to last-minute scheduling constraints. He sends his warm regards and appreciation for this platform, and we hope to engage with him in future sessions. We remain committed to fostering open, constructive conversations around data protection and looking forward to a rich session ahead. At this point, I would like to introduce Mr. Zahir Sheikh to take us more about BDO and also take us through today's webinar. Over to you, Zahir.
Thank you so much, God Save, and a very warm welcome to everybody. I'm very excited. I see 152 participants, and the number is going up. So obviously, the more participants for me, the more excited I get. Very excited to be here with all of you today. Let me tell you a little bit about BDO globally. So BDO globally, as you can see from this map, we actually have a global footprint. We have offices in 167 countries with nearly 120,000 staff. And we're actually the 5th largest audit, advisory, tax company globally. So this is a fantastic network, and we're very proud to be part of this network. You can see our footprint in Africa there in the center. We have a huge footprint as well. And all of the places that are marked in red is where BDO has permanent offices. So you can see the footprint here. There's very little of planet Earth that isn't covered by BDO. Next slide, please. So a little bit about our offices. We have, like I said, 166 countries and territories we have a presence in with 1,800 offices. And as I said, nearly 120,000 professional staff working together to provide services seamlessly to all of our clients. One of the beauties about being in BDO is the fact that we have global processes, we have global technologies. Because we are a global giant, we're able to do the investments and bring the very best in technology, the very best in services seamlessly across the globe. We have partnerships with Google, with Microsoft, and so on and so forth at the global level, trying to develop the best solutions in audit, in tax, in advisory services, and so on and so forth. I just want to talk a little bit about our advisory services and our other services specifically now. So perhaps we can just go back to that last slide, and I'll say one or two things about why the collaboration between East Africa, Zambia, and Southern Africa is very powerful. One of the reasons is because we actually have the same systems. So when we talk about East Africa, we're looking at the same practice management systems, the same learning management systems, the same billing systems, and so on and so forth, and the same platform. So basically what this means is, if I want to call my colleagues in Zambia, in DRC, in Burundi, I don't have to pick up a phone. I can basically just click on Teams, and a person at the other end picks up the phone, and we can speak face to face, and it's that quick. So we really are seamless. We're fully integrated with one partnership agreement. And this makes us very unique in the services that we provide because it gives us speed. Speed of response is something that you will get if you engage BDO in any service. Next slide, please. So now just a little bit about our services. And as Debbie said, I head the advisory division in East Africa. And basically, there are a number of services that we provide. So we provide internal audit and risk management services. Specifically in internal audit, we provide internal audit as an outsourced service. Now, what this means is if you don't want to have an internal audit division or department within your company, you can hire BDO. And typically, the savings from doing something like this is between 50 to 70%. Yes, you heard me right. 50 to 70% of cost savings by hiring an international firm such as BDO to look after your internal audit and your risk. And then obviously that comes with the advantage, then you then have access to global methodologies, to global network, and to the latest cutting edge information. We also have a fully fledged management consulting division. We have a corporate recovery division, which deals with ailing businesses, basically doctors for businesses who assist in turnaround. We have a very strong deals advisory division, which provides services for corporate finance and transaction advisory services. In fact, I'm very proud to say that BDO's deal advisory division has been number one for the past several years in the number of deals. So I'm talking about number of deals and not value of deals. And what this means for us is when our clients entrust us to make deals for them, what they're basically saying is they trust us to take them over the finish line. And this is really important. So the mere fact that we have more deals than any other organization globally every year means, that our clients trust us. And this is something we're very proud of. I also had the forensic division in East Africa. And again, we provide all sorts of services, digital forensics, fraud investigation, whistleblowing hotlines, and so on and so forth. Paul Macharia, who's going to come later on, is the expert on data protection. He also provides technology advisory services, as well as data protection consulting services. And then we have our audit division, which I think is perhaps quite well known globally, where we provide statutory audits, audits of donor-funded projects, special purpose audits, as well as training on IFRS and other trainings. We have a very good tax department, which provides both compliance services and advisory services. On the advisory side, we do tax audits, we do tax health checks, we provide advice on transfer pricing, both locally as well as internationally. We provide advice on employment taxation, expatriate taxation, as well as indirect taxation. And we have a very strong tax division within that, which has a very good record of dealing with revenue authorities. So if you find you have a huge claim from the revenue authority, please don't hesitate to contact our tax department, and they should be able to take you through the deep and murky waters when that happens. And then we have a business services and outsourcing division, which basically provides a whole host of outsourcing services. I mentioned internal audit, but these guys also do accounting, bookkeeping, compilation of management accounts, statutory annual reports. They provide financial management agent services, fiscal management services. They can do your payroll for you. They can act as company secretaries, admin and accounting services. And also we have a legal division. So that's enough about BDO. Let's move on to why we're all here today. Next slide, please. So let me start by telling you a little bit about data protection. So data protection is something that affects each and every one of us today. Let me start by defining what we mean by data protection. In simple terms, data protection refers to a set of strategies, practices, and technologies employed to safeguard the privacy, the integrity, and the availability of data, mostly personal data. It encompasses various measures which ensure that our data is protected from unauthorized access, from corruption or loss. And it's important to understand that the data protection primarily focuses on personal data, which is information relating to identified or identifiable individuals. So these are real people. This includes everything from names and contact details to online identifiers and location data. However, data protection doesn't exist in isolation. While corporations and companies aren't the data, the direct subjects of data protection laws in the same way that us individuals are, they play a crucial role because, as you will see, they're the ones who act as data controllers and data processors who must implement these protective measures. So while the act is protecting you and me, it is directed at these corporates, okay, who actually handle our data. Additionally, businesses benefit from related legal frameworks that protect certain types of corporate information, such as trade secrets and intellectual property. In many business contexts, the line between personal and corporate data blur. Think of business email addresses. For example, mine you will say is Zahir Sheikh at BDO. So you can see that my email address will identify me. This is why organizations of all sizes need to understand and implement proper data protection practices, regardless of whether they're handling consumer data or operating in a B2B environment. Next slide, please. Let's now dive a little bit deeper into what data protection entails. So here we're going to talk about the 7 principles of data protection. At the core of effective data protection, there are 7 fundamental principles that guide how personal data should be handled. These principles are enshrined in various laws and regulations around the world, and they provide the foundation for responsible data management. So let's go through them one by one. The first one, lawfulness, fairness, transparency, LFT. This principle requires that all data processing must have a legal basis. In other words, it must be legal, it must be conducted fairly, and it must be completely transparent to individuals. So, for example, when you download mobile banking app, before you can use it, the bank must clearly explain what data they'll collect, how they'll use it, and obtain your explicit consent. They can't hide this information in complex legal terms or collect additional data without telling you. The bank must also ensure they have a legitimate purpose for each piece of information they collect. Next, purpose limitation. Data should only be collected for specific, explicit, and legitimate purposes, and it should not be used for reasons which are incompatible with those which were originally stated when they collected your data. For example, a fitness tracker company collects your heart rate data to monitor your exercise performance, they cannot later decide to sell this information to health insurance companies for determining your premium rate without your knowledge and consent. The data must be used only for the purpose you agreed to when you started using the device. Next, data minimization. Organizations should only collect the minimum amount of personal data which is necessary to fulfill their stated purposes. So, for example, when you sign up for a newsletter, only needs your email address to send you updates. They don't need your home address, they don't need your date of birth, and they don't need your phone number. So, a company practicing data minimization would only ask for your email and perhaps your name, but nothing more. Next principle is accuracy or data accuracy. Personal data must be accurate and it must be kept up to date. Inaccurate information should be immediately deleted, and it shouldn't be stored. So, for example, if your bank has outdated contact information in their system, and you go online and then you update your data through their online portal, it is the bank's responsibility to ensure that this change is reflected across all their systems immediately. If they send accounting statements, your account statements to your old address because parts of their systems were not updated after you've updated it online, then they've actually failed to maintain your accuracy, to maintain accuracy in terms of data, and potentially they've exposed your financial data to others because now your uh, your bank account details, okay, will end up at your old address where somebody else might be living. So you can see how that can be a huge problem. Next, the principle of storage limitation, where we say data should not be kept for longer than necessary for its original purpose. Organizations need clear retention policies to delete data when it's no longer needed. Again, as an example, a hotel might keep your reservation details during your stay and perhaps for a short periods afterwards for customer service purposes. But once the service is complete and any legal requirements for record keeping are satisfied, or perhaps for tax purposes, you should then immediately delete your personal information. You shouldn't. For example, your credit card details and other personal preferences indefinitely just in case you return. This is something they shouldn't be doing. The next principle is integrity and confidentiality. Again, organizations must implement appropriate security measures to protect personal data against unauthorized access, loss, or damage. Uh, as an example, a healthcare provider who stores patient records must must employ several layers of security, such as encrypting their data, secure access controls, regular security audits, and also staff training. They might use systems that track who accesses which records and when, and then they encrypt sensitive health information, both in storage as well as during transmission, and they ensure that employees only have access to the specific information needed to perform their jobs. And then lastly, the seventh principle, which is accountability. Organizations are responsible for demonstrating compliance with all data protection principles and implementing appropriate measures to ensure adherence. Again, as an example, a multinational company must maintain detailed records of all their data processing activities. They must conduct regular data protection impact assessments before implementing new technologies, and they should appoint data protection officers when required. When they are questioned by regulators, they should be able to provide documentation which proves their compliance efforts, including the training that they provided to their staff. They must be able to produce their data processing policies as well as records of consent from individuals. So remember, before you add people to your database, be sure you obtain their consent. So these seven principles, they aren't just abstract concepts or bureaucratic requirements. They're actually designed with a clear purpose to protect your and my or individuals' privacy rights and to ensure that our personal data is handled responsibly and ethically. When organizations follow these principles, they end up building trust with the people whose data they manage. This trust is essential in our digital economy because it's the foundation of the relationship between data subjects, which is you and me, and the companies that process our information. Following these principles also significantly reduces the risk of data breaches and also other privacy violations that can harm individuals and damage businesses. Next slide, please. Thank you. So now that we understand the principle, let's examine why data protection has become so crucial and so critical in today's world. So let's start with protecting sensitive information. Sensitive personal and financial data is constantly being collected. We all know this. And it's being stored and it's being shared. This information has now become a major target for cyber criminals. If it's not properly protected, it can result in identity theft, financial loss, and reputational harm. You heard data is the new gold. It's the new gold. Ensuring that this data is secure is therefore a critical responsibility for any organization handling personal information. The other reason is explosion of digital data. Digital data, as we all know, is growing at an unprecedented rate. In 2020, 64.2 zettabytes. I don't know if you've heard of zettabytes before, but if you haven't, go and check it out. So 64.2 zettabytes of data were created globally. And that number is expected to reach 181 zettabytes this year. Every time a person interacts online, be it through social media, digital payments, or smart devices, they leave behind a data trail. This massive volume increases both the complexity and the urgency of protecting data. The other reason why data protection has become so important is increase in cyber threats. The rise, because there's more data, this has also led to increased cyber threats. These cyber threats include things like data breaches and phishing attacks, as well as ransomware. Today, you can see organizations can be blackmailed just on the basis of their data. The global average cost of a data breach in 2024, you would be shocked to hear, this is the average cost of one data breach, was $4.45 million, which is up 15% over the last 3 years. And the consequences go beyond just the financial costs. They also include reputational damage and legal risks. And the next reason is legal and regulatory requirements. So globally, data protection laws are being enforced more strictly than ever before. Regulations such as the GDPR in Europe and the CCPA in California have led to billions and billions of dollars in fines. I mean, fines like we've never seen before. And closer to home, we see strong frameworks in countries such as Kenya, with the Kenya's Data Protection Act, which was enforced in 2019, and also Uganda's Act, which was passed in the same year. And now Zambia has also joined the battlefield. So compliance is a necessity. Failure to follow these laws can result in significant penalties and restrictions on business operations. The next reason is consumer trust and business reputation. Consumers today are more conscious of how their data is handled. Research shows that 81% of people need to trust a brand before engaging with it. Poor data practices can lead to significant loss of consumer trust, which will directly affect your sales and your growth. On the other hand, companies that take data protection seriously build stronger reputations and long-term customer loyalty. And then there's also the aspect of economy and competitive advantage. Data protection, as we know, it's not just a compliance requirement. It can be and is a competitive advantage. Companies which are proactive in protecting data, they can stand out in the market. And this is what leading companies are doing now. They will be very quick to publish their policies to say, guys, come to us, all your data is safe. Okay, we are not going to be hacked. We're not going to be broken into. And even if we are, okay, these guys will not get access to your data. So with 73% of consumers preferring companies that are transparent about how they handle their data, compliance today has become a brand differentiator. It can actually support your business growth and also the investor confidence. And then there's also the issue of technological advancements. Emerging technologies such as AI, artificial intelligence, big data, and the Internet of Things, or IoT, as some people call it, they have literally transformed how we operate and how we live. But they also introduce new risks. This year, over 75 billion IoT devices are expected to be in use. You heard that right. How many people on the globe? 8 billion? Maybe less? 75 billion IoT devices are expected to be in use, each one a potential vulnerability. As these technologies evolve, data protection strategies must keep up, including preparing for future risks such as quantum computing. And then finally, there's the issue of ethics. At the heart of data protection, we have ethical considerations. Organizations must treat personal data with respect and with integrity. This has not been the case in the past. In the past, organizations were known to hoard data and to even pay to secure data. So, dealing with ethics in terms of data privacy and data protection means being transparent, being responsible, and being fair in how organizations use and store data. Public opinion is also shifting. Now, 87% of consumers believe companies should be regulated to ensure ethical data use. So, being ethical is not just about being right, it is actually expected. And now, what I want to do is I'd like to invite Paul Macharia to take us through the next section, which is going to be the regional outlook, focusing on data protection laws in East Africa and the larger South Africa region. Over to you, Paul, and thank you to all the participants for your attention thus far. Paul.
All right. Thank you so much, Zahir, for taking us through the principles and understanding why data protection is so crucial. But where did data protection really start, basically here in Africa? We all know about the EU and the GDPR, but when did the conversation on data protection start here in Africa? So it started from the Africa Union Convention on Cybersecurity and Personal Data, which is also commonly known as the Malabo Convention. And this was adopted on June 27th, 2014, during the 23rd Ordinary Session of the AU Assembly, which happened in Equatorial Guinea in the city of Malabo. And this treaty aims to ensure and establish a comprehensive legal framework across Africa to address issues relating to electronic transactions, personal data protection, cybersecurity, and the fight against cybercrime. Some of the key objectives of the Malabo Convention were to harmonize cybersecurity and data protection laws, and they sought to align diverse cybersecurity and data protection legislations across AU member states, hence promoting a cohesive and digital governance approach. There's also the promotion of electronic transactions. So by providing a legal framework for especially the electronic commerce, the convention facilitated secure and efficient digital transactions, fostering economic growth and integration. Another key takeaway from the Malabo Convention was the aim of enhancement of cybersecurity measures. It emphasized on the development and implementation of robust cybersecurity strategies and also the protection of personal data, in where the convention underscored the importance of safeguarding personal data, ensuring privacy rights, and establishing mechanisms for data protection compliance, which has been very well tackled by Zahir. However, despite its adoption in 2014, the Malabo Convention required at least ratification by 15 AU member states so as it to enter into force. So this milestone was achieved on June 8, 2023, when Mauritania became the 15th country to ratify the convention. As of now, the 21 member states have already signed the convention, and 16 also having completed ratification, and a balance of 16 who have just deposited and yet to ratify. So what are some of the challenges? The challenges in the slow ratification process, because of the nearly 9-gap difference between adoption and enforcement, there are certain challenges such as national priorities, existing domestic laws, as well as the concerns over the convention's provisions. I'll take you back to 2020, 2021. We all know what happened there. and such a challenge would create a slow ratification process. There's also the need for an updated provision. So critics have pointed out that the convention lacked detailed mechanisms for enforcement and does not address emerging issues like cross-border data transfers and cross-border data flows, as well as the use of AI in data processing. Remember, this was done in 2014, and we are now in 2025. So the significance of Africa is that the Malabo Convention represents a significant step towards strengthening digital governance in Africa and provided a unified legal framework which facilitates regional cooperation, enhances cybersecurity resilience, as well as promoting the protection of personal data. So its alignment also with the Africa Continental Free Trade Area underscores its potential to contribute to economic integration and the development of a secure digital economy across the continent. So today we are focusing on Zambia. And Zambia, we want to take you through the journey so far. And it all started in 2009, where Zambia making this significant progress in establishing a data protection regime. The journey started way back before 2021 Act. And before the Act, Zambia had the Information and Communication Technologies Act number 15 of 2009. And they also developed the Cybersecurity and Cybercrimes Act number 2 of 2021. The ICT Act served as the initial framework for managing data across the IT sector, but it lacked specificity on privacy rights and regulatory enforcement. The Cybersecurity Act also focused more on the technical protections and the criminal activities involving data, rather than establishing a formal data protection obligation. So neither of those two laws included detailed requirements for data controllers, processors, or even data subject rights. So to bridge this gap, there was a big shift towards data protection. This is evidenced in the Data Protection Act of 2021, which marked a major shift in how the country views and manages personal data. It introduced a structurally and legal binding framework for data protection, including data subject rights, rules for cross-border data transfers, as well as formal duties for both controllers and processors. And this will be covered by my colleague, Michael, in this webinar. So one of the most notable developments is there was also the establishment of the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner, who was to be with us today, but we unfortunately could not be with us. And this is the dedicated regulatory body for data privacy and enforcement. As of now, the ODPC's office is fully operational and actively registering and both data controllers and processors. The emphasis is also laid by the ODPC on strong data security and breach prevention. So at its core, the Data Protection Act guarantees the protection of personal data, defining how it should be collected, used, shared, and stored. Furthermore, it spells out the obligations of data controllers and processors. Another key provision is the restriction on data transfers, particularly across borders. These transfers are only permitted under certain conditions, and everyone must comply with the safeguards that have been approved by the ODPC. There's also a mention on breach notification. So the Act imposes a breach notification obligation on all organizations, especially when they experience a data breach. More on this later. One key thing to note is that there's a registration deadline that has been enforced by the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner. And this is in a few days' time. Actually, it's in less than half a month. The deadline is on 30th April 2025 for all data controllers and processors in Zambia to register with the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner. This deadline is a critical step in the full enforcement of the Data Protection Act, signaling a shift from voluntary awareness to now mandatory compliance. Organizations that process personal data are now legally required to formalize their operations by registering, disclosing the types of data, and demonstrating adherence to the data protection principles. Zambia's data protection framework now stands amongst the most structured in the region, with a dedicated regulator in place, a lawful operation, and Zambia is now not only addressing its own privacy needs, but also setting a standard for neighboring countries to follow. When we talk about neighboring countries, we first look at East Africa. So Kenya began its journey in 2009, and as at 2021, they issued additional regulations for data protection compliance. The same is with Uganda, who started their efforts in 2014, just in and around the Malabo Convention time. And Uganda made significant strides and established the Personal Data Protection Office in 2020 to oversee compliance. A neighbor that both Kenya and Zambia share, you'll be very surprised to know that Kenya and Zambia share a neighbor, and this neighbor is Tanzania. So Tanzania's progress towards a full data protection regime is more gradual. In 2015, they had the Cybercrimes Act, and in 2020, they introduced the Data Protection Act, and it is now enforced. And there's also another deadline in Tanzania for registration. More on that. A neighbor is Rwanda, one of the front runners in this region, who started their journey in 2018, and in 2023 had their law fully enforced and is established under the National Cybersecurity Authority. A neighbor who's a bit far from Zambia is Ethiopia, and they've addressed this by having the Computer Crimes Proclamation number 958 of 2016, which included unlimited privacy, data privacy provisions, which focused a lot on cybercrime. In 2020, they have a draft proclamation, and they are hoping to effect this very soon. Looking closely home, we have some countries just neighboring Zambia. You'd be surprised to know that Zambia shares its borders with 8 countries. I did not know that, and now I know. So there is Angola, the DRC, Tanzania, Malawi, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Botswana, and also Namibia. So today we'll only focus on a subsequent number of neighboring states. We start with Angola. Angola was one of the early adopters of the data protection legislation, where in 2011, the country passed a data protection law, which was number 22 of 2011. It was majorly inspired by European and Portuguese data protection models, and it set out clear definitions of personal and sensitive data. The office that is mandated to oversee data protection is the APD, and you have to seek consent. So the APD is not yet fully operational, and there's a delayed process in the implementation, but the law is in practice. Another neighbor is the DRC, who is also part of BDO East Africa. In March of 2023, Democratic Republic of Congo made significant progress and enacted the Digital Code Law, number 23-010, which includes comprehensive provisions on data protection. However, the law has not yet come into full force, and implementation remains pending, as necessary regulations and operational setup of the data authority are still in development. Another close neighbor is Malawi, and is amongst the latest to enact a dedicated data protection law. And this is the Malawi Data Protection Act, which was passed in February of 2024 and is in effect from June 2024. The law introduces clear obligations and is overseen by the Malawi Communications Regulatory Authority, MACRA. MACRA is already established, and they've published a comprehensive data protection handbook, which offers guidance to organizations and signals Malawi's readiness to enforce the law. We will be doing another webinar on data protection focus in Malawi, so stay tuned. Mozambique is yet to fully enact a specific law. While privacy is also acknowledged under the national constitution and limited provisions exist within the country's electronic transactions law, there is still no comprehensive legal framework. But this makes Mozambique one of the few neighboring countries to Zambia, excuse me, still operating without a formalized data privacy regime. Our last focus will be Botswana, and this has also recently made major strides in passing Data Protection Act number 18 of 2024, which was signed into law just recently in August of 2024, became effective in October of 2024. This act introduces strong safeguards for personal data and outlines clear obligations for organizations that collect and handle such data. With the law now in force, Botswana is positioning itself as a leader in the region in terms of data privacy enforcement and also giving legislative clarity. So this regional scan reflects varying levels of maturity. While Malawi and Botswana are gaining momentum, countries like Angola and DRC are still within foundational and transactional phases. Mozambique remains in the gap and is presenting opportunities for future legislative development. In this context, Zambia's full enactment of implementation of its Data Protection Act marks a major milestone, placing it ahead of some of its neighbors and reinforcing the leadership role in governance across Southern and Central Africa. While legal and institutional frameworks for data protection are steadily and advancing across Africa, many organizations still face practical hurdles. From limited technical capability to enhance internal policies, these challenges often hinder the meaningful implementation. We will explore some of the most common obstacles that organizations must navigate as they strive to meet regulatory requirements and build a culture towards data privacy. First and foremost is one of the challenges is lack of awareness and education. So one of the most common issues is the limited understanding of data protection laws, especially in small and medium-sized organizations. Many employees are unaware of legal obligations, leading to unintentional non-compliance. The rapid evolution of laws further complicates this issue because laws keep changing every now and then. Another issue is resource constraint. Again, many organizations struggle with budget and have budget limitations and a shortage of skilled personnel. This also mostly affects the small and medium-sized enterprises, which find it difficult to allocate funds towards data protection infrastructure and hire experienced, qualified professionals. There's also the issue of complex regulatory landscape. So organizations implementing and operating across multiple jurisdictions face the challenge of complying with different and always almost conflicting data protection laws. In the case of where you have presence in all of East African countries and also Central and South African countries. So these regulations are also being frequently updated, requiring companies to stay agile and adjust their internal processes. There's the risk of data security, which cybersecurity threats are almost a constant concern. So organizations must defend against ransomware, phishing, and hacking attempts, and also employee negligence or malicious insiders. Data localization requirements, where in some jurisdictions require specific types of data to be stored and processed locally within their national borders. This can be very expensive and operationally challenging for organizations, especially those who have cross-border operations. There are some data privacy concerns. Basically, consumer expectations around privacy are now growing. People want transparency, control, and accountability in how their data is being processed and how it is being used. Vendor management and third-party risk. This is one of the biggest challenges in data protection compliance. So reliance on third-party service providers introduces additional compliance risks. If these vendors fail to uphold adequate data protection standards, then the primary organization remains very exposed. There's data retention and deletion, and Zahir mentioned this. Organizations often hold on to data longer than necessary, either due to poor policies or lack of enforcement. This not only increases the storage costs, but also elevates the risk of data breaches and non-compliance. In summary, compliance is not just about having a law in place, it's about capacity to implement it. From education gaps to technical infrastructure, organizations must overcome wide level of challenges. So mitigating these risks requires a combination of clear policies, skilled personnel, investment in technology, as well as ongoing training. So having explored the common challenges, that organizations face in achieving data protection compliance, let's look at the certain questions you need to ask yourself if you're planning on implementing a robust data protection network. So the first question is, what data do we collect and what data do we store? Before anything else, organizations must clarify the types of data they collect, whether it's personal or sensitive, or even business critical data. So for example, an insurance firm may collect ID numbers, claim history, health reports, and not understanding why this data is being collected. So you need to align the purpose with the legal obligations and also your organizational goals. If you cannot justify why you're collecting this data, then you shouldn't probably collect it. You should also not probably store it. The second is where the data is stored and where it is processed. It is not enough to know what data you have. You also need to know where it is or where it lives. Is it on local servers? Is it in cloud platforms like Microsoft Azure or AWS? Or is it system managed by a third party? Each location carries its own risks, and organizations must assess compliance within data localization laws. The third question is who has access to this data? Access control is the frontline defense in data protection. You need to clearly define who can access this data and under what conditions. You also need to ask yourself, how do we protect this data? Data protection requires robust defenses, and this means applying and identifying all the gaps in your current practices and closing them with tools like firewalls, employing data encryption, having secure backups, as well as enforcing endpoint protection. What are the legal and regulatory requirements that apply? Every organization operates under its specific legal frameworks. So from Zambia's Data Protection Act, regulations may vary with other acts, such as the EU's GDPR, the United States CCPA, even Kenya's Data Protection Act. You need to understand the full range of obligations, whether it's consent management, breach notification timelines, and enforce this as per your regulation and or as per your legislation. Do we obtain consent? That has been covered, where consent has to be collected. It should never be assumed. You need to review how and when you ask for it. Make sure your language is simple and clear and not buried in a lot of legal jargon. One very key important question is, are your third-party vendors compliant? Your data protection efforts are only as strong as your vendors. If you have outsourced functions such as HR or IT or even finance, you need to assess how those vendors are handling your data. Last two questions would be, how do we monitor and audit compliance? Once your framework is in place, you need to employ mechanisms to ensure that all compliance is followed. You need to implement compliance dashboards, set KPIs for handling data, and also schedule regular audits. Very importantly, are your employees trained on data protection? Even with the best policies, they will fail if employees don't understand them. Training is very critical, both at onboarding and also as part of ongoing learning. Use phishing simulations, quizzes, and even real-world breach case studies. Everyone from interns to directors plays a role in data protection. So these questions are not just administrative, they're also very strategic. They help organizations anticipate risks, comply with the law, and build trust with customers. By addressing each and every single one of these questions systematically, you set a solid foundation for data protection, not only being compliant, but also being resilient to face off any evolving threats. At this point, I'd like to hand over and introduce Michael Muntumo to take us through some of the key steps of achieving data protection compliance in Zambia. Over to you, Michael.
Thank you very much, Paul, for that detailed breakdown. Okay, so now we want to go a little bit further into the Local Data Protection Act. So when we think of compliance, we must think of it as think of compliance as your organization's immune system. It is not just about avoiding fines, but building resilience. So we're now going to break down requirements that can help us add value beyond just ticking boxes in our organizations. So in terms of compliance, what's one of the first things we need to do? Primarily, we need to register as a data controller or a data processor. So as required by the Act, an entity that determines the purpose or means of processing personal data or processes data on behalf of another must register with the Data Protection Commissioner. Okay, then henceforth, what we need to do internally is we need to conduct a data protection impact assessment, or DPIA as it is most commonly known. So DPIAs are tools that identify and minimize risks related to processing of personal data. They are particularly important when processing involves sensitive data or large-scale processing. And Paul just went into a little bit of detail on this point with regards to make sure that staff are trained when it comes to handling of personal data. So it is the responsibility of the organization that if your staff are part of the team that handle personal data, that they are skilled up and trained. People are often the weakest link when it comes to data protection, hence making training essential. Okay, respect data subjects' rights. Some of the rights that are entailed under the Act is a data subject has the right to access their personal data. They have the right to request for correction or even delete their data. They have the right to object to processing of their personal data as well. So as data controllers or data processors, we are required to respect these fundamental rights of data subjects. And lastly, we need to implement security controls and retention policies. We've touched on this in the previous slides, but essentially we need to ensure that we have robust policies in place. We need these policies supported by the appropriate information technology tools that will help us implement and enforce these controls. So I'm going to proceed to the next slide now. Okay, so what are some of the penalties when it comes to non-compliance? So non-compliance within Zambia's Data Protection Act is not just a legal risk, it's a business critical threat. Let's now examine what constitutes non-compliance and the penalties organizations and individuals face under the law. So the first thing is a failure to register as a data controller is non-compliance. As required by the Act, an entity or person determining the purpose and means of data processing needs to be registered under the Act. The next area of non-compliance is not appointing a data protection officer. Another thing that the Act mandates is that you need to appoint an individual that's going to oversee compliance, advise on obligations, and liaise with the Data Protection Commissioner's office. So your Data Protection Commissioner can be an internal staff, or this, as a business, you can also outsource another firm to fulfill this obligation. Breaches of data subjects' rights. As we mentioned in the prior slide, data subjects do have rights under this Act, and when these rights are violated, you are in breach of the Data Protection Act. And then unauthorized data transfer outside the Republic of Zambia. As specified in the Act, cross-border transfers require explicit consent from the Data Protection Commissioner's office. So if you're an organization that does do cross-border transfers of data, you need to write to the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner explaining what types of information you're transferring outside the Republic, and the Commissioner will hence authorize that. And then the last one is not reporting a data breach within 24 hours. As mandated by the Act, once again, any data breach that is detected needs to be reported to the Data Protection Commissioner's office within 24 hours. Okay, we're going to move on to the next slide. So keeping those offenses in mind, what are now some of the financial implications that are tied to those offenses? Okay, so violating principles. So Mr. Zahir did a very detailed breakdown of what the data principles are. So when any entity or individual violates these principles, you are subject to a fine of 40 million kwacha, or 2% annual turnover of your business, or whichever is higher. If you're an individual, you are subject to a fine of 400,000 kwacha, or 5 years jail time. Okay. Then the next offense is a failure to register as either a data controller or a data processor. If you are a corporate entity, you are subject to a fine of 200,000 kwacha or 5 years jail time. If you're an individual entity, it will be 400,000 kwacha or 10 years jail time. And then general non-compliance to the act. So this can involve maybe a breach of data subject rights. So if you're a corporate entity, you'd be fined 800,000 kwacha or 2% of your annual turnover or whichever is higher. If you're an individual entity, your fine will be 400,000 kwacha or 10 years equivalent jail time. And then code of conduct breach. So there's a certain ethical behaviors that are required under the Act and are stated in the guidelines of the Act as well. So when you are found in breach of these, you'll be fined 80,000 kwacha or 2 years jail time if you're a corporate entity. And the same applies if you are an individual entity as well. So we're going to proceed to the next slide now. We've spoken a little bit about what are the consequences of not adhering to these penalties, but also to understand, just as an entity, putting the fines aside, how does this affect your organization? The first being reputational damage. There are serious consequences to you and the public, and you can even lose certain clientele because of not protecting your customers' information. You are in charge of your customers' information, and it is your responsibility to protect it. The Data Protection Commissioner's Office also reserves the right to suspend or cancel your registration or your license if you are found in breach of the Act. And then data subjects also have the right to file a lawsuit against you if you are found in breach of their rights. And lastly, imagine you have to deal with now an audit by the Data Protection Commissioner's Office because you're found non-compliant to some of the requirements of the Act. So now you have to avail resources to deal with this investigation. This is going to cause unnecessary business disruptions. Now, that's even worse if maybe the primary focus of your business is revenue generation and your required resources are now busy dealing with lawsuits and investigations. So these are just some of the things to keep in mind when it comes to non-compliance with the Act. Okay, we've spoken a little bit now on data controllers and data processors. So now we really want to just dive in and understand what really is a data controller and what is a data processor, and what's the difference between these two. So a data controller determines why and how data is processed. An example of this is a university can collect student data, and they're going to determine what they want to do with that information. They're the ones that are in charge of basically deciding how that information should be processed, for how long they should keep that information, where that information should be stored. They are the primary custodians of that data. That is what a data controller is. So keeping that definition in mind, we now go to a data processor. So a data processor processes data on behalf of a data controller. So you cannot have a data processor without a data controller. A data processor acts on instruction from a data controller. So let's look at some practical examples of a data processor. So you can have a cloud service provider that stores company information. So they're storing that information on behalf of another organization who's the data controller or the custodian of that information. So in other words, they're acting on instruction of that data controller or that other firm that owns that information. So the data processor has been provided that information and they're processing it, or in this example we're using, they're storing that information on the cloud on behalf of that data controller. Another example is a firm that outsources HR services. So let's say BDO is the data controller. They've decided, okay, we want someone else to be doing our HR and our payroll for us. So they're going to hire company X to do that service for them. So company X is going to be the data processor. Company X will receive information and data from BDO, and they're going to process that information with regards to the agreement that they have with BDO in place. So that's a data processor. I hope the distinction between those two entities are clear, and I hope some of you already starting to get understanding of where your firm stands with regards to being a controller or a processor of data. So we're going to proceed to the next slide. So regardless of whether you're a data controller or a data processor, you still need to abide by data processing principles. Once again, we went into detail in regards to what these principles are. Some of them are lawfulness, fairness, and transparency. It's also responsibility of a data controller or a data processor to protect the data that they are processing. They need to ensure data confidentiality. They need to make sure that the integrity of the data is maintained. So that can be done through various IT systems, making sure that the data protection policies and privacy notices are communicated with all the staff, that are communicated to the custodians of the data as well. And then once again, very important, you need to appoint a data protection officer that's going to help your organization manage all this information. You need to notify your data protection commissioner in case there is a breach within 24 hours as mandated by the Act. And then you need to ensure that you have a process, a documented process in place so that your firm is continuously ready to undergo annual audits so that they remain compliant with the Act. Okay, so we'll proceed to the next slide. Okay. And then there are some cases where you have what we call special roles. As data processing ecosystems become more interconnected, it's increasingly common for multiple organizations to share responsibility over the same data, or for a single organization to play multiple roles. We now want to understand what it means to be a joint controller or to hold dual roles under the Data Protection Act, and why it's important to clearly define these responsibilities for compliance and accountability. So let's first look at what a joint controller is. So to put it simply, these are two or more data controllers that jointly come together to determine the purpose and means of processing the data. So if you remember, a data controller is one that determines how the data should be processed. So in this case, we're saying there can be more than one company that have an agreement in place that are going to say, okay, we're going to collect this information, but I'm going to be responsible for processing this part of the information this way, and then you're going to be responsible for processing this other information this way. So let's look at a practical example. You can have a telecom company. In Zambia, here we have Airtel, Zamtel. So let's say Airtel. And then you can have a fintech partner, like let's say a mobile money entity. So these two entities will collaborate on a mobile banking app, for example. So Airtel will decide, I'll be responsible for collecting user IDs and location data. And then the mobile money entity will say, I'm going to process financial transactions. So they have a joint agreement and they've determined how both of them are going to be processing the information. So regardless, both must register with the Data Protection Commissioner's office. It's not just one entity that needs to do that. Both of them need to do that, and they need to specify that they are joint controllers during the application process. And then there can be another instance where an organization can be both a data controller and a data processor. So let's look at an example where such cases can exist. You can have a cloud service provider. If we remember the example we used, where a cloud service provider would typically be a data processor, because they're storing that information that's been provided by another entity, which is the data controller. But that cloud service provider can decide, okay, this information that I've been given, I also want to use it for my own means. So I want to use this information that I've collected to do some data analytics to improve my services. So in that case, they've determined a means of processing that information, which makes them a controller of that information as well. So in that case, they are both a data controller and a data processor. Let's look at another practical example. You can be a firm that has an HR department. You collect payroll information from your staff and you process it. That makes you a data controller. But you can also decide that you, as a business, you also want to outsource your payroll services, where you can provide payroll services for other organizations. So other organizations will now be providing that information to you, and you'll be processing that payroll information on their behalf. So in that case, you're a processor of that payroll information as well. So in that, a data processor. Okay. So once again, even if when you do have this dual role functionality, you need to apply separately both as a data controller and a data processor. Once again, it's mandated that you have a data protection officer that will help you manage this large volume of information that you're collecting internally and from your external data processors. Okay. We now want to discuss the registration process. So registration is the first step towards achieving compliance. We want to break down post-registration obligations to ensure your organization meets the Data Protection Commissioner's Office requirements. So there is a live website, dataprotection.gov, where you can download the application form. Am I audible? Yes.
Yes, you are.
All right. Okay. Thank you. So there's a website as displayed on your screens, dataprotection.gov.zm. On that website, you can download the application form. There's also a detailed guideline that you can download that basically takes you through step by step on how to complete the form. But what we want to do now, we just want to look at the key areas in the form that will be required to be completed, and just want to break down some of the key terminologies here. So you'll be required to indicate whether you're an individual, you are a micro-organization, you're a medium organization, or a large organization. So in the guidelines, under section 3 of the guidelines, they actually define what a micro-organization is, what a medium organization is, and what a large organization is. So individual, of course, it's self-explanatory, but a micro-organization, as defined by the guideline, is an organization that does not have more than 10 employees. And then a medium organization is an entity with 11 to 50 employees. A large organization is defined as an entity with 50 or more employees. So that will guide you in determining what type of organization you are and in completing this form. The next thing you need to do is you need to complete your business details, your business name, background registration, business sector, and the address of your business. Very important, the next step is describing what your data processing activities are. So under this section, you'll be required to describe what sort of databases you're using to store your data. You need to categorize your data subjects, for example, whether it's employees, clients, and also the types of personal data that is processed. We are going to keep harping on this point, but you need to disclose whether, as an organization, you are storing information in Zambia or you are transferring information outside of Zambia. You need to provide the details of your data protection officer. As previously advised, this can either be an internal staff member or you can outsource this to an organization. In that case, you provide the details of the external organization that's providing the data protection services. And then also very important, you need to perform a risk assessment of the information. What are some of the security risks that are associated with the data that you collect? And then you need to provide the mitigation plans to deal with these identified risks. Moving on to the next slide, there are some required documentation that you need to attach along with your application. You need to attach your background registration certificate. You need, if you are a data processor, that you would have a data agreement between yourself and whoever your data controller is. So if you're applying as a data processor, you need to attach your data processing agreement. And then also you are required to create a flowchart or pseudocode just breaking down your data processing activities. So once you've completed the form, you have all your attachments ready, you can now email everything together to the subscribed email address here, compliance@dataprotection.gov.zm. Once you've done your submission, you receive an email link just advising you on how to do the payment. So again, depending on what type of entity you are, if you're a large organization, the fee you have to pay will be 4,000 kwacha for the certificate, but there is a smaller fee just for registration, which is 400 kwacha. So in total, in this example, if you're a large organization, you pay 4,400. Then the DPC's office will confirm receipt and will begin processing your application, and you should get an answer within 14 working days. Once this process is complete, there's another important step you need to complete. You need to conduct a self-assessment questionnaire. This, we usually advise to do this with your IT department. The type of information that they'll be asking for here is they need to understand your IT systems. They need to know where the data is stored, the types of databases you're using, the servers, the number of servers that you have. They need to look at basically, to sum it up, just an inventory of your IT systems and see how that ties into how the information you're collecting is managed using the IT systems. So there's a link here. The whole process can be completed online. And then finally, you need to ensure that as required by the Act, when you've trained your staff, that there is proof of training. So usually you have evidence like training certificates to show that your staff have completed the data protection trainings. And then also you need to ensure you have a documented process in place to handle data breaches. So this will help you comply with the Act in the case that there is a breach that occurs. And then this will just help you in general be audit ready and you'll be compliant with the requirements of the Act. All right. So at this stage, I'm now going to hand over back to my colleague, Paul, and he's just going to take us through the best practices for effective data protection framework.
Thank you, Michael. To sum up what Michael has basically taken us through, it is imperative that whether you're operating in Zambia, South Africa, East African countries, it is important to have a data protection framework. And we're going to look at some of the best practices for effective data protection framework. So the first bit is you start by identifying what type of personal data you collect, process, and store. This can only be achieved through a data audit. You then need to classify this data, some of which might be very sensitive, like medical records or financial data, which then would require a higher level of protection. The second bit is assessing your risks and vulnerabilities. You need to assess your data security risks, identifying possible threats like cyber attacks, unauthorized access, accidental loss, all of which would affect your data protection framework. So you need to use formal risk assessments to prioritize your actions, and this helps you to know where to focus your time and resources. You need to develop data protection policies. Every compliant organization should have documented policies and procedures. Another key practice is the implementation of technical controls, and this is all about technology. So you need to make sure that you're using tools like encryption tools, access control tools, firewalls, DLPs, which are data loss prevention systems, and this ensure that you keep your systems, your data safe through the use of technology. Michael has emphasized the importance of providing employee training. It's an explicit requirement in Zambia, whereas it might not be explicit in your jurisdiction. It is a best practice, and employees should understand what data protection means, how to follow the policies, both the internal ones, as well as the legislation itself, and what to do in case of a suspected data breach. You need to obtain and manage consent. So you need to have valid consent from individuals to process their data. And just as important, you need to give them the control. Basically, you allow them to change their preferences, and to the extent of even withdrawing consent, even after they have given you the consent, and also ensuring that if they request their data, you are there to be able to give them what type of data you hold about them. There's ongoing audit and monitoring compliance. Even with the good practices, you must always check that they are actually being followed. You should set up monitoring mechanisms, perform regular internal audits, and also you can contract an external audit organization to conduct a data audit for you and perform these audits on a regular basis. Audits are usually known as the early warning systems. So if something is identified during the audit, it is a clear flag that you're not following the best practices. You need to implement an incident response plan. So having a plan in place in case things go wrong. And this includes clear procedures for identifying, reporting, and also responding to data breaches. In Kenya, the ODPC is 72 hours. In Rwanda, it's 24 hours. So you need to have varied incident response plans to ensure that you're able to meet the regulators' requirements in the jurisdiction that you operate. You also need to undertake vendor compliance, or rather you make sure that all the organizations who you have outsourced data to are also compliant. So whereas you can't outsource you can outsource your services, but you can never outsource your responsibility. You need to also stay updated and evolve. You need to keep your internal program dynamic, and also keep in touch with the data protection laws that are ever so rapidly evolving, and keep your controls regularly updated. And compliance is more or less a living process and not just a checkbox. So some of the key tools you can implement as you start with software. So data protection software solutions, there are some which are like Varonis, McAfee, DLP, Symantec DLP, and this monitor who is accessing your personal data, and you can enforce very strong rules like encryption. And even the basic one that comes with most Windows workstations, this is BitLocker. You need to conduct privacy assessment, impact assessment, and you can only do this with a privacy impact assessment tool. There are tools like OneTrust, TrustArc, Nimity, and many others that are aligned towards GDPR and also can be able to improve your privacy impact assessment capabilities. There are several data mapping and inventory tools. So whereas most people may maintain their data inventory on Excel to make sure that they are easy to, it's very easy to update, it's also at risk if your data inventory is also exposed. It means whoever has been able to breach your inventory now knows exactly where your data is and who has access to it, and they can make a lot of money out of it. So you need to implement invest in tools. There's several tools that are available online, such as Data Gravity, Data Inventory, and many, many others. You need to train people. So you need to invest in training and educational resources. There is a lot of training that is out there, including today's webinar, which we have facilitated, but there is also structured learning that can be found on very many other platforms. Compliance and frameworks, or rather legal guidelines. So there's the ISO framework 27001 for information security management. There's also the ISO framework 27701, which is the privacy information management system. Others include also the NIST cybersecurity framework, the NIST 800, as well as the very available online, a compliance checklist that has been developed for GDPR compliance across EU nations. And you can borrow from that and tailored it to your specific jurisdiction. For data breach response plans, there are so many available sources online to be able to prepare you to contain a breach. And there are also other platforms for compliance, and these are the PECB, the IAPP, which comprise of free toolkits, checklists, policies, and guides that are regularly updated to reflect the changes in the law. So as we move on, let's look at, and as we close today's webinar, let's look at some of the future trends in data protection. One, artificial intelligence and machine learning. These are the biggest buzzwords in the recent past. And AI and ML are now used to detect breaches in real time. So if you have the right tool, you'll be able to protect your data and you don't have to monitor it. Your AI agent will be able to do it for you. You need to implement also, and we're looking at emerging trends such as zero trust architecture, which means you never trust any default equipment, not even just the ones that you've issued internally. So every request must be verified regardless of who or where it is coming from. We're also seeing a lot of work being done on privacy by design. And this is about building privacy into systems from the beginning. There's increased regulation. We've seen from Zambia's 2021 Act now being fully implemented, going back to GDPR in 2016. So we're seeing a lot of harmonization of regulatory requirements, especially in sectors like banking, health, and education. There's blockchain, another big buzzword, and blockchain can strengthen the data integrity because it's an immutable copy. And this can be leveraged by fintechs and any other payment service providers. Enhanced encryption techniques, we're seeing this as being the new way of protecting data. And there's homophobic or homomorphic encryption, which allows secure data processing without any decryption. So it processes encrypted data in the original state and also ends up being encrypted, and there's no process of decryption there between. There's also user-centric privacy controls. So people want control over their data, and all the platforms should offer dashboards and are offering dashboards for consent management, access requests, and also deleting of their personal data. So these 9 trends reflect the future of data protection. When not all of them are fully deployed, especially here in Africa, they are signaling where we are all heading. And staying informed and being responsive organizations will help build trust and stay compliant. There'll be widespread adoption of AI. We expect that to happen in the near future. We're also seeing global harmonization of data protection laws, like the Malabo Convention, which once it's fully ratified by the remaining countries, we'll see it now become an Africa-based data protection law. Zahir spoke about quantum computing, and this is coming. It's actually here. AI is all about quantum computing. There's also integration of privacy-enhanced technologies, what we call PETs. And these are differential privacy and security multi-party computation. And these are very powerful tools. There's a lot of data sovereignty and localization. So a lot of countries, including Zambia, are emphasizing that personal data must be resident within their jurisdiction. So we expect that almost everywhere across the world, this will be the case. In conclusion, the future of data protection is driven by rapid innovation, new legal frameworks, and also the rising public expectations. AI, ethical data use, localization, compliance, this will define how we protect personal data. We've come to the end of our agenda for today, and thank you for staying with us. I'd like to invite Mr. Godsev Nkede to give us a brief recap of today's webinar takeaways. Over to you, Mr. Nkede.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you once again for taking up the time to join us in today's webinar on data protection, compliance in Zambia, the journey so far. We've had an insightful session that walked us through both the evolution and the current landscape of the data protection in Zambia across the region. We began by understanding the importance of data protection globally and how Africa, through the frameworks like Malabo Convention, is working towards a stronger digital governance. We heard from the team who shared Zambia's legislative journey from the ICT Act of 2009 to the Data Protection Act of 2021, and the official launch of the Data Protection Commissioner in 2023. We're also reminded that the registration deadline of 30 June 2025 is fast approaching. From there, we took a regional and global perspective, comparing Zambia's framework with the neighboring countries in East Africa and looking at lessons from across the continent. Data protection matters is not just for compliance, but for building trust, reducing risk, enhancing data accuracy, and maintaining ethical practices in digital age that's producing more data than ever before. We explored real case studies from Kenya and other countries to understand the legal and financial penalties of non-compliance and what organizations can learn from them. We also have covered the core concepts of the Zambian law, the role of the data controllers, the data processors, including specific duties and examples of joint and raw roles and how to handle these responsibilities correctly. Importantly, we broke down the registration process under Zambia's data. We looked at the requirements, the documentation, where and how to submit, and what organizations need to do after submission, like completing the compliance questionnaire and preparing for audits. Finally, we looked at best practices, tools, and the future of data protection, including the impact of emerging technologies, increasing consumer awareness, and the ethical obligations organizations now face. Today's webinar is planting a seed into participants on the need to understand the Act and to know your responsibilities. It is not a substitute for obtaining expert advice or contacting the Data Protection Commissioner for areas which need clarity or guidance. As BDO, we are proud to support clients across Zambia and the region, not only in becoming compliant, but embedding data protection into their operations, strategy, and governance. As we close today, we encourage you to complete the feedback survey to help us improve future webinars and better serve your compliance needs. On behalf of BDO and all our presenters, thank you. And we look forward to partnering with you as you move forward on your data protection journey. I now invite my colleague Joseph to quickly run through the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paul, Godsev, Michael, and Debbie for the insightful webinar. I'm pretty sure our participants have learned a lot on the evolving trend on data protection in Zambia. For now, I'll take the question and answers, and our panelists will be answering them live. And then for the rest of the questions, we'll be able to answer them through chat. So the first one I want to check is there's a question about, could you please explain the ways in which HR departments in Zambia work to protect employee rights? Additionally, is there any formal process such as subscription or registration for employees to benefit from these protections? I'll throw that first question to Paul.
Right. So I believe Michael has addressed this, and we'll be able to then give you particular information. So it's all about localization, and everyone must foster localization or follow the act as it should be. So whether it's HR and any other outsourced activity, we did speak about third-party assessment. We did speak about localization. So there are various sections which apply to the act that need to be brought into effect within your organization. So the first bit is definitely you conduct a data audit. You need to understand the data. Second bit is now data classification. And then from there is you determine what type of data needs to be localized, what needs to be either hosted on a third-party application. And at that point, you'll be able to make that decision. Thank you, Joseph.
Thank you, Paul. The second question, for companies that rely on cloud solutions for web apps and storage of data, will the commissioner allow storage of data outside the country, provided the hosting companies meet the requirements for security and the other safeguards? I'll throw that one to Michael.
Thank you, Joseph. Yes, I think the big chunk of the answer is in that question. Yes, the cloud service provider needs to meet the security requirements. We need to apply to the commissioner's office, but basically what I need to say and make clear is that it's at the discretion of the commissioner whether they allow that or not. Yeah, that's, I think, the best way to answer that. But on your side, when you're doing the application, just make sure those criteria are met in terms of security. You've done your assessment, ensure that this provider can safeguard your information. They've provided proof that they can do that. You have all the requirements in terms of data retention. They've provided proof on where, if the servers are stored anywhere else apart from where they've listed. Maybe it's not just in the country that you are thinking the data is stored. You need to have all that information readily available when you're doing the application to the commissioner's office. Okay, thank you.
There's a question from one of the attendees where they state, I believe that we all want to be good and compliant corporate citizens, but there's lack of thorough awareness and education. This is the key in helping entities be compliant. So the penalties shown seem to be very steep, and we are killing businesses. Are we killing businesses or helping them to be compliant? I wish you would have given us your name. We would be able to reference this question and answer it even in more detail. So data protection now is not about, we have moved, or the whole globe has now moved away from it being a maybe or being an if, and right now it's a must. So the penalties might be steep, but the compliance journey is also easy, and it's also very achievable. So the reason why the penalties are so high is to ensure that all organizations are compliant. You'll have your data, the same level of compliance that you may demand of your personal data will be required of you when you're handling another person's data. So yes, the penalties are steep, but the rewards in a few years would be beautiful.
I think because of time, we can take two more, and then we can wrap it up. And the other questions will be able to be asked on the chat box. There's a question that says, Michael mentioned that it is a must for joint controllers to register. Are they supposed to pay for this registration? Michael, please take that one.
Yes. So remember, joint controllers are basically just data controllers, multiple data controllers, whether it's been two or more. So same process. You need each entity, each individual data controller needs to register, and they need to pay the related registration costs and the application fees. Yes.
Okay. Finally, what qualification should the DPO have? Paul, you can take that final question.
Yeah, so the Act, neither in Kenya nor in Zambia, has placed a specific requirement with regards to the qualifications that you have. In previous webinars, we did cover the question which we had, which I'll reference here. Does the data protection officer sit in legal? Do they sit in IT? Or do they sit in operations? And the simple answer was there's no one size fits all. So referencing back to the question on the qualifications, the most important one is someone who understands what data sits where in the organization. So someone with institutional knowledge, someone who understands the organization and also the operations. They then leverage on IT. And leverage on IT's skills to implement encryption, to implement robust firewalls, to implement other security mechanisms. You then also leverage on your lawyer or your legal expert to interpret for you the various laws across various jurisdictions. So it's not a one-size-fits-all answer. The same way the DPO role does not have explicit, say, qualifications, but training is very essential, and there are also globally acknowledged training that can be undertaken and certification that can be undertaken. The CIPIT, and there are others which have been developed for the EU, which are very applicable to our own laws. So you can leverage on that, or even have your organization undertake ISO 27701 certification as an entire organization. So that means everyone in the organization will then be upskilled, and the organization will also be compliant, because that certification, for you to retain it, you need to undertake re-audits almost on an annual basis, hence enforcing a lot of compliance. I see there's 22 questions in the chat, and I think we won't have time to answer all of them. Thank you so much for the questions. What I'd ask is please reach out or through the invite or through the video links or websites, the emails on our website, and we'll be happy to take this forward. At this point, I'd like to return the mic back to Joseph to take us into the closing stages of this webinar.
Thank you so much, Paul, Michael, and Godsev. As we come to the end of the webinar, I would like to welcome back our very own CEO, Debbie, to wrap it up for us. Debbie, over to you.
Thank you so much. This has really been a very insightful webinar. And as we come to the end of today's webinar on data protection, I want to sincerely thank you all for your time and participation. And to our video speakers, thank you so much for unpacking the technical areas of the law, sharing best practices, and providing practical steps on how organizations can prepare, register, and remain compliant. And this webinar has shown us that data protection is no longer a future consideration, but it is indeed a current responsibility. So whether you're in public or private sector, whether you're a data controller or processor, Your role in protecting personal data is central to trust, compliance, and long-term sustainability. And as at BDO, we are committed to support your businesses and institutions, not just as compliance paperwork, but with end-to-end advisory and building robust and data protection frameworks. And we will work closely with clients to assess the risk, as well as design controls, train teams, and prepare for benefits. And as earlier mentioned by GodSafe, please don't forget to fill in that feedback survey. And once again, I'd like to thank you for being part of this important conversation. And we look forward to continuing to work with compliance to ensure that you are all compliant. And I would like to urge all of you to stay compliant, stay secure, and have a great day. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Debbie. Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of our webinar. As always, kindly look out for our next invitations, our next webinars in risk advisory, forensics, data protection, as well as FRS. And until then, thank you so much. Have a nice evening and a nice afternoon to all of you.
Thank you.